Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Jacob and Jacob podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Pear, filling in for my co-host, Jacob Bubbaum. I'm my good friend, Benny Ehrlich. Benny, thank you so much for being on today. And today, I'm really excited to have someone that I grew up watching on SportsCenter, and you saw him on ESPN for almost 3 decades. He was just doing coverage for the Olympics with NBC, the man who needs no introduction, Kenny Mayne. Kenny, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks for having me.
So, Kenny, you were just doing coverage with NBC, and your time with ESPN ended a little while ago. So what's the next step in your career for you?
Depends on the next phone call. Seriously. I don't know. There's a couple things going on, but I don't know which one's going to happen necessarily yet. So it's not something I'm putting out. You know what I'm saying? I'd rather not say I'm going to so-and-so and then have it fall through. But I'll be doing something for someone, but not like full-time. It won't be replacing what I was doing. I think I'll do a little of this and a little of that, and all together it will add up to something.
So while your time at ESPN is over, I want to ask you about the letter that initially got you hired at ESPN. The one where you said, where there was a bunch of boxes to check, and then one of the boxes said, "We'll hire you when ESPN 5 is on the air." What's the backstory behind that letter?
Well, it's a long story, but I had interviewed with ESPN way back in 1989. I was working at a station in Seattle called KSTW and did not get hired. About 6 months later, I quit the job I had. Longer story that we don't have time for. But I still wanted to get on with ESPN, even though I was no longer in TV now. So I just did some jobs to kind of, pay the bills and kept my relationship going with ESPN. They started using me as a freelancer. I was living in Seattle, but they'd, everything from go interview Gary Payton to Ken Griffey to go down to Portland, cover Tanya Harding's story. I flew once or twice out of town. They flew me to different places to cover a certain story, but they were not hiring me full time. And it just seemed like they were dragging it out forever. It was like 4 years of doing this freelance work. And I kept thinking I think I'd proven myself to get hired full time. So I think it was just born of frustration. I was like, I'm going to try to wake him up with kind of a crazy letter. And I said, please check the appropriate box. I'm trying to decide on my future or something to that effect. And the first one said, stand by the mailbox, contract's on the way. Second one said, keep up the freelance work. Third one said, we'll hire you about the time ESPN 5 hits the air. And I think it did wake them up. They're kind of like, you know what? He did this in an unusual, unconventional way. And we do have, places where we could put him. And soon after that, I was hired at ESPN 2, the old show called Sports Night.
If you did that in today's day and age, do you think you would have still gotten hired? Because that's pretty ballsy. And there was no resume, correct?
Well, they already knew my resume. I mean,
yeah.
I'd been back and forth with them for almost 4 years. So my resume was the fact that I was freelancing for them. Like I didn't have any other credits. I mean, I did some for NBA Entertainment, Prime Ticket, TSN, so I could have said, hey, I'm also doing these things. But in my opinion, I'd already proven to them I knew how to do whatever it was they wanted me to do. I didn't really know that it would be anchoring SportsCenter. That really wasn't even my goal. It was to get hired full-time and stay in Seattle, but be like a field correspondent and maybe end up, developing that into something, more consistent. But they wanted somebody to come back to Connecticut and do this show called Sports Night. I had a very small role on it, but it was great. It was the way I started.
So, I mean, even before ESPN, you would have tryout with the Seattle Seahawks. So how cool is it for you? I guess you grew up in Seattle. You're a Seattle guy to get a tryout with your hometown team.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was sort of always an outsider in pretty much everything I've ever done, and always kind of had to step in and prove that I could be whatever it was that, that they wanted based on, let me start that over. I think I was always an outsider, both football and TV. And I kind of always had to prove myself first, like be the walk-on, so to speak, right? So I had walked on at Washington. Then I walked off. I went to junior college in Wenatchee, Washington. Then I walked on at UNLV, but I got a scholarship right away. But I was always second string. I redshirted 1 year, then I was second string my junior year, second string my senior year. The kid who played ahead of me, named Sam King, led the nation in passing yards. And I was his backup. I played here and there, but not that much. and he got offered to go to the Seahawks, but he turned it down to look elsewhere. And then my coach said, hey, if you like Sam, why don't you give the other guy a try? That was me. So I got to go up and throw. Steve Largent happened to be in the facility that day. So they were, hey, come out here. We need a guy to run routes. And that's pretty cool, getting to throw to a Hall of Fame player, you know, one of his, what was that, 82. So he had some years to go. And they signed me, but I failed the physical because of my ankle injury that I'd had in 1980. So I never really played again, but I got a TV job soon after that happened, after I got cut. And that was at that little station called KSTW. And I think 7 years later is when the ESPN relationship started up. And then it took another 5 years to get hired. So it was always like, hey, I'm over here. You know, it was always like me trying to get noticed. And eventually I did, I guess.
So you mentioned that when you started at ESPN, it was Sports Night and then later Sports Center, and you did a variety of shows and segments at ESPN. Would you say that one of them was your favorite?
Working with Stevie Wonder certainly was number one. I got a couple times actually, and once even back at my little station in Seattle. But at ESPN, I got Stevie to say I can't be at the All-Star game. I have a high ankle sprain. That was his line. But there were so many. It's hard, you know, that one. When people say name one, that's the one. But you know, we did so many fun things. You know, got to be at Dale Earnhardt's 500 win. Got to go to Europe and all over the world doing this thing called Wider World of Sports. I did 10 or 12 years of the NFL. You know, doing my little fictional football stories. Sports Center itself was fun. You know, RPM was fun. I mean, Main Street, I forgot about that one. We did like a situation comedy for about 3 years. And it was me, Aubrey Plaza, Parks and Rec, Allison Becker, John Glazer, Ben Schwartz, Chris Smith, all these, Mulaney was in one, Ben Stiller, Jimmy Kimmel, like all these people joined in, whether it was one episode or a bunch. And we got to do sort of a fictional version of life at ESPN. So that also obviously one of the highlights.
So I guess I have to ask, I mean, you had a really successful career at ESPN, but even before the Seahawks tryout, did you know that you wanted to go into TV either in high school or college or even right after college?
I'd say sooner than that. Probably, you know, grade school. It wasn't necessarily to be on Sports Center. There was no Sports Center. And it wasn't even necessarily to be on for something related to writing, creating, delivering, you know, like from a very young age, I was already directed. I'd watch the evening news every night with my parents. And I was more about serious journalism, you know, politics and world events and so forth. And even in college, I didn't want to do sports for my career. I wanted to play football first, but separate from that, I wanted to do like more serious news. You know, the PBS show called Frontline, that's probably my favorite show. Documentary style, you know, real news, world events. And what happened was once I got on TV in Seattle at that little station, they only had 5 days a week. We always said if there's news on the weekends, it's news to us. But once they added the weekend show, the news director was like, well, you played football, you're doing sports. It was almost like by default. And once I started doing sports, then I was like, oh, this is kind of fun. You get to kind of do your own thing, and it's very freestyle, and you know, you're doing highlights and going up to Seahawks games and all these fun things. And I think I just shifted my emphasis, like, let's send a tape to ESPN and see what happens. So it all just happened. There was no plan to end up being a Sports Center anchor. I think it was just, I was always going to be something with communications, whatever that ended up being.
So you've been working in TV and sports TV for a long time now. What would you say the biggest difference has been over time with social media becoming much bigger and the way sports has been covered, like from when you started to now?
I'd say the advent of the internet, you know, even late 90s when I was doing shows with Dan Patrick and Stewart and the guys, people didn't know the results. You know, we were the first ones to tell them the result of the game, unless they're from that town, say, right? Or heard about it somehow. But now, more often than not, people are watching on their phones. They already know Steph Curry had 48 points. They, you know, so we at ESPN or anywhere really, you know, you need to present something that's different or entertaining or give them new material. Oh, now we got the interview with Steph Curry. You didn't have that on your phone. You know, like there's still more that a TV show can do. You know, I mean, there are people who don't care to watch the shows, because they got what they want. Oh, we won by 12. Good, I'm done. Other people like, oh, I want to sit down on my couch and hear Scott Van Pelt do it his way, or me, or whoever it is. So hopefully there's still that draw.
Mm-hmm. Now, I mean, for me and Benny, who are young kids going into the, or hopefully trying to go into the business, what advice would you give us from someone who's been there and done that?
I think just the same I've always given is be doing something. Like you're doing it right now. You're doing a podcast, and everybody has that ability to kind of create now that I didn't have in my day. There was no internet, right?
Mm-hmm.
In my day, there was 3 local stations, the independent station or 2, and local radio, a couple newspapers, right? You had about 7 choices, right? Now, all you got to do is open an Instagram account or start a podcast or get on Twitter or Facebook or whatever you want to do. And there's more access. There's more access for you if you have something to share, or the way you conduct yourself. You can now put it out. 7 billion people might watch this, right? Probably not, but they could potentially.
Let's hope.
If they all get the IP, right? Yeah, so I think just bottom line answer is just be getting better, be doing something, make your mistakes now, and keep improving on your product. Hang on one second. I got to check one thing. Don't go.
So I wanted to ask you about one specific thing you did at ESPN, Kenny Mayne's Wider World of Sports. What was that like, and what was your favorite place to go out of all the countries and places you traveled to?
Well, I had just done a show called Main Street, and they were going to kill that for some reason. Nobody really explained. So I went in to the head guy and said, hey, I got an idea to replace the thing you're about to kill, because I'd heard that was happening. And I wanted to nominate my own idea, right? And he liked the idea right away. We just had to figure out how we're best going to do it and how many places. And I said, why don't we take the old Wide World of Sports show that everybody knows, add the letter R, so we're going to call it Wider World of Sports. And it's just going to be me going out in the world, learning about unusual sports that most of us have never heard of, and, bring back these stories. And it was more serious than I probably thought it would be. Like originally I thought it'd be just, go out there and be silly in the world. And then when we got out there, it's like, wait a minute, this is like an interesting story. Like I want to really tell this story, maybe a couple jokes in there, but it wasn't meant as comedy the whole way. It was truly like to, be as explained. Like we're going to go tell you guys about that crazy thing in Switzerland or whatever it is. So the favorite ones, Irish road bowling stands out. They take an iron ball and throw it down a street, and then they do it again and again until somebody throws it the least number of times, 1.25 miles. Another one was called the Palio, and that's a horse race in a town called Siena, Italy. They've been doing it for centuries, and it was just amazing to watch this whole event unfold. We stayed there for almost 10 days, I think, to really get deep into what the story was. And so I'd say that one stands out for sure.
So let's say I said one of those sports that you saw when you visited all the countries and places was going to be added to the Olympics, and I gave you 4 years to train. Which sport do you think you could be the best in?
Oh, Irish road bowling for sure. I can still throw things. Like that's the only thing I have left athletically. And I just saw, it's funny you say that, because a friend just sent me, I don't know where it came from. There's some poll of Americans, I'm assuming it was American males because it sounds like it, saying like 40% think they could compete in an Olympic sport today. I find that number high.
That's
I don't think people get, it's always funny to me, like the worst player on an NBA team, like the worst player would absolutely murder any of us at anything, right? One-on-one, rebounding, shooting, right? The worst player. And these are the best athletes in the world at all these different disciplines. And now 40% of Americans think they could show up and not be embarrassed in those games. I don't think 90% of America could catch a slant route from me, and I'm 61 years old. So I think those numbers are a little bit off. But you're asking me, my one specialty is still throwing things. So I'd say Irish road bowling would be a no-brainer. Something I'd want to enter and compete. I don't know that I'd win, but I know I can throw an iron ball as far as most people.
Yeah, talking about that debate, I always hear people say, oh, like, I think I could potentially beat this NBA player one-on-one. I think the debate should be, could you even score 1 point on an NBA player one-on-one?
Most American males could not hang with the best WNBA players, or not even the best, just any of them. Sue Bird would like cross you over and make you look like an idiot. Now, I'm not talking about elite basketball guys, like obviously a really good college player, that's not regular American. The thing goes up like a pyramid, right? You got all these kids playing at age 8. Now they're in junior high, a bunch of them are out. Now they're in high school, a bunch of them are out. Now they're in college, most of them are out. Now they're at the pros, they're all out, except for the very best. And for people to actually think that they can hang at that level is kind of silly.
So you're part of like that very small percentage in football because you got to the top, you got to college. Would you say that playing college football or playing sport helped you in terms of being able to understand athletes better when you were interviewing them?
Oh, for sure. Particularly football. I mean, I don't pretend to relate to all athletes in all sports other than as human beings. I think if I ever had any advantage that way, I just think in general, I just kind of treat the athletes like regular human beings as opposed to, this exalted player because he can run a great post corner or what, they're just people. They happen to be faster or catch better or throw farther or whatever they do. So I think a lot of the athletes like that, oh, he's actually just talking to me like a human as opposed to I'm the reporter and you're the big star guy, or girl. But yeah, football definitely helped. I think football helped in a whole bunch of ways, like the team ethic and confidence in what I do and not being afraid to fail. Like that's, I think, a lot of people's biggest problem in anything, whether it's media or any kind of job, right? People are always worried about how they're going to look. What if I try and I fail? What if I'm not good enough? And you got to let that go. Like that's the only way to succeed is to fail first, usually, right? Like the old expression, fail big. I always told my daughters, like, shoot for the moon. If it doesn't work out, then try the next one. Our coach, Tony Knapp, we had all these pass routes or pass patterns, I should say, where like there was almost always one deep route and then the other stuff came intermediate and somebody short and here's the running back swinging out. And you always look deep first, right? Like drop back. And if nobody's home in center field, you're throwing deep. If they are, now you look to the next guy. And I've kind of adopted that as my life philosophy. Additionally, like the first thing I tried to do after leaving ESPN is get Michael Jordan to be in a commercial. And I failed, but big deal. Next day I tried something else. Like, you got to shoot for the moon sometimes.
So you had that special relationship with the players, and on your last episode of Sports Center, you had Aaron Rodgers, Sue Bird, Marshawn Lynch, and a few others on. What did it mean to you for them to come on for your last episode?
Oh, man, a lot. I was very flattered and, touched the fact they all said yes immediately. I mean, I basically just asked a bunch of friends. I've become friends with all these people throughout my time. Jamal and I are good friends. We talk all the time. Sue Bird as well. Marshawn now and then, we had a special relationship. Fred McGriff was the surprise at the end. That was just to be silly because we'd always repeated the Tom Amansky defensive drills video. So, and Aaron Rodgers, I've gotten to know really well. So obviously having Aaron was selfishly just kind of cool, right? He's in the middle of all this drama with regard to whether or not he was going back to Green Bay, but we become friends just through our relationship, hanging out, doing stories, talking, texting, whatever. And I kind of felt like they'd all be there if I asked them, but it was also surprising and flattering that all of them said yes. And they all said yes right away.
What was your last day like at ESPN? Was it bittersweet? Were you like happy to leave, maybe upset to leave? What was it like?
Well, it was more than just the last day because I announced that I was leaving on like May 10th, right? And I still had 8 shows left. Like my schedule was, Tuesday, Wednesday and off, and then Saturday, Friday, whatever they were. And so that was weird knowing I'm leaving, yet I'm still there, yet trying to do good shows and kind of feeling this weirdness like, well, this is weird. I got 4 to go. I got 3 to go. So the last one was even more so that way, I think. Just, it was kind of surreal. It was like, missing people I'd see down the hall, like, oh, I'll probably never see that person again. Or if I do, it'll be, some chance meeting, right? I'm not going to that building anymore. And my good friends, I'm playing golf, a couple of them on Thursday. Like, I'll still see the people that are in my life and I'll think fondly of some of the others, but not see them as much, So there's like no malice at all. It's like, I wish everybody well, they're going to do good shows. They got great content and great people, but I'll do it for somebody else. So I think I got over it pretty quick. Like, the only time I got close to like tearing up or getting emotional was when Marshawn Lynch said something about how I had helped people see him more clearly, you know, see him in a better light. Like that was really heavy. That was like a cool thing that he said.
And on your last Sports Center, Jamal Crawford made a huge contribution to your charity, Run Freely, excuse me, that you and your wife Gretchen started. Can you talk more about that charity and why you started it and who it benefits?
Yeah, well, I wrecked my ankle my junior year. We were playing Oregon. Last play of the game, somebody stuck their helmet on my ankle, had a fracture dislocation. I played the next year. I ended up failing the physical, I told you, at Seattle after that. And that was when I'm 22, right? So now I'm 61. Every decade it would get worse. It just, you know, just old age and arthritis, and I got bone spurs in and out, or metal in and out, and bone spurs taken out. So I probably had like 10 surgeries or something. And I was in really bad way about 10 years ago, I think it was, like where I was seriously considering either fuse it, replace it, or cut it off. Like I was in that kind of pain daily. Instead, I found a better therapist who kind of brought it back to life. And then a number of years later, 2018, I found this guy in Gig Harbor, Washington named Ryan Blanc, and he was making this device called an ExoSim for veterans. I went and bought one and changed my life in an instant. Like I ran on the treadmill the first day and cried for about 2 hours because I couldn't believe, like, oh my God, I can do stuff again. Like I have no pain. And so Gretchen and I said, let's do something good with it. And we started a foundation. It's called Run Freely. The website's RUNFREELY, runfreely.org. And Jamal has donated more than anybody. I think Gretchen and I need to catch up to him, actually. So I don't know if it's one a month, probably not quite. I'd have to look at the emails and add it all up, but we're close to helping one veteran per month in 3 years. So 36, not quite. I think we're a little under that. And we just raised enough to help like 6 more. So once they get the brace, which isn't even the right word, they like to call it a device. Brace is insulting to him, I think. Because you can get a brace anywhere, right? You can buy one for $28 somewhere, but this is like made just for you. It only fits one person. It's perfectly matched to, you know, your weight, your height, your foot, and you can just go do. Yesterday I was working out in it. I was all over town during the Olympics, exercising, just taking long walks and no pain. Playing golf on Thursday. I played golf last week. Take walks with my wife. I can play flag football, you know, and none of it hurts my ankle. It doesn't fix my ankle. It just lets me do stuff with my bad ankle. So that's the difference.
Yeah, and we'll be sure to link that the charity in our bio description, so all our viewers can check it out and hopefully make a contribution to it. But you just mentioned flag football. I mean, if you went out right now in a flag football game, how many TDs are you dropping?
How many what?
TDs are you dropping?
Depends on if Snoop Dogg is my receiver. We play a game every Super Bowl. We didn't get to this last one because of COVID. Hopefully next time in LA. And it's a bunch of veterans, and I'm the quarterback, and most of them are missing an arm or a leg. And we play against ex-NFL players. And we were doing it like 3 times a year. We had a good thing going for a couple of years, and then it kind of fell off a little bit. But it's fun just to get out and do it again. I did it a couple weeks ago. Just went out and threw to some high school kids. Like, I still enjoy throwing a football like you might like to go hit a bucket of balls, or, you know, somebody likes to go play tennis or whatever. So it's still something, it feels good. You notice I just had this out here, and it's fun to have it in my hands. Like, I think it's almost like a pacifier. Like, I've done this all my life. Since I was 10 years old, I've had a football in my hands. So why stop now?
So I just want to ask you quickly, because since you mentioned it, what was it like covering the Olympics this year, especially with all the COVID rules and protocols going on?
Well, we were in Connecticut. You know, we didn't go to Japan. So Carrie Champion and I did a nightly show from NBC Sports headquarters in Southern Connecticut, Stamford. It was obviously, I mean, even in the building, it was different because of COVID, right? We wore a mask except for when we were on the set. And the athletes obviously had to follow very specific rules. So it's amazing it even came off. To tell the truth, I second guessed it the whole time. Like, is this even the right thing? Hopefully they got through it, you know, without spreading anymore. And the fact that everybody seemingly complied as well as they could, I still hope everybody gets their vaccinations. I'm pro-vaccination. I know that's controversial somehow. but it'd be nice if we could, as a country, come together on one thing, keeping each other safe. That would be wise. But unfortunately, that too got politicized. I don't know. I mean, you're hearing all the numbers going up all over the country. I'm worried about the fall. I have no idea what's going to happen in a month or 2 months or how it's going to be. And it could have been different.
I mean, you see like guys like Kirk Cousins and Lamar Jackson. I think it's ridiculous that Kirk Cousins is saying that he'd rather sit in plexiglass and he'd rather be away from his teammates than just get the vaccine. I don't understand how it got so political. But when you think of these guys that aren't getting the vaccine, like, what is your reaction to that? And how does that make you feel?
I've said it, in my little Twitter platform pretty straight. I just don't understand. I think ignorance is as big a thing as we have to defeat is the virus. I wish there were a vaccine for ignorance. And I understand there are some people who medically shouldn't have vaccine. Like there really is a class of people but it's a very small number, right? Their doctors would say the vaccine could have some detrimental effect because of the thing you already have, and those are very specific cases. And I also understand how some Americans would be reluctant given the history of, you look at the history of like the Tuskegee, if you look that story up, how Black Americans were kind of used as guinea pigs, and other Americans around the country, different experiments through the ages. But that aside, here's this once in 100 years medical issue we're all facing, a virus that we hadn't seen before. And here's this readily available free thing that you can do that very, very, very rarely could have a detrimental effect on you. But if you look at the stats right now, the people who are in the hospital, I think it's close to 100% did not get the vaccination.
Yeah.
What more evidence do you need? But instead, people change it around and talk about freedom and they're being forced to do this and that. And well, we're forced to do a lot of stuff. Do you drive a car? You have to have a license. You have to have insurance. You have to let the government know where you live with regard to paying your taxes to, or your Social Security has to be on your company's, your company's registration so that the government knows who's paying taxes. And there's all sorts of things we submit to. When you get on an airplane, you have to walk through a metal detector. I mean, the list is very long of things that we all kind of like, what, that for the good of the country, for the good of my fellow citizen, I'm going to comply with this thing with it. Temporarily seemingly takes away some freedom. I don't love wearing a seatbelt. But I do it because it's probably smart, right? Because if some guy plows into me or I miss a turn, that's probably wise to have a seatbelt on. But the same argument, like, oh, I'm not wearing a seatbelt, that takes away my freedom. Like, I don't know. I wouldn't want my kids driving with a drunk driver, but somebody could argue, why can't I drive drunk? That's my freedom. Like you could take this to the nth degree, all the examples. And in this case, just having what's proven so far to be a safe vaccine that's stopping you from having real problems if you get the virus. It doesn't stop you from getting it completely. I know people who have had the shots and still got it, but they recovered quickly. So the evidence is overwhelmingly on the side of doing it, yet there are some people still resistant.
I know sometimes we're not sure how it's going to be. The vaccine's been out for a while and people are still reluctant to get it. Do you have hope that at some point we will come together and everybody who maybe has doubts now, or maybe they for some reason don't want to get it now, at some point everyone will come together and will actually be able to beat it once and for all?
I think the numbers, at least that I've seen the last week or two, show that a lot of people are now getting it at a faster rate than they had been a month ago or whatever. So I think that, to your point, I think it's already happening to some degree. Obviously, the more people that are safeguarding against it, the better off we're all going to be, right? And and on the mask thing, believe me, I hate wearing a mask. I'm a little claustrophobic. I don't like the feeling. But today I went to get coffee. I didn't have it when I came out of my car because nobody was near me. But when I got to the door, I put it on. Not everybody did, but I did, both for my safety, their safety, and just to make people feel comfortable, right? Like some people are weirded out, like, oh, he doesn't have a mask on. Like you do it just to be a good citizen, right? Like it's not that tough to put a mask on. It's a pretty small thing to ask. And is it 100% effective? Probably not, but it's probably more effective than not having it. I'm going to go with that.
If I was a PR guy or marketing guy and I said to you, give me a 5-word slogan on why to get the vaccine, what would it be? I mean, I add a little humor to this one.
Don't be stupid. Protect your children. I don't know. Like to me, it's just a no-brainer. I don't know. What happened was, and what's really crazy, if you look at some of the politicians and Fox News and people who have taken the shots themselves, but are discounting the worthiness of the shots, mocking Fauci, giving people reasons not to do it, right? They're saying out loud, oh, this thing's not that big a deal. It's like the flu. And, they say all those things, right? Yet they themselves, I mean, look, the last president got his shots, yet his people and the people who support him are the ones that are the biggest proponents of those, telling people, oh, be suspicious. They're trying to control you. Don't be a sheep, all that stuff. So, read into it what you will. But if somebody literally has already gotten his or her vaccinations, and yet they're putting out the propaganda to influence people to not get them, that should tell you something.
Well, Kenny, I want to thank you so much for coming on today and speaking with Benny and I. Before I let you go, I have one final question. So on your last SportsCenter, we talked about it previously. You had an all-star cast of guests coming on. But let's say ESPN said you could have added one more guest to come on, and they can't say no. Who would it have been and why?
Probably Bill Walton.
That's a good one.
He's a good friend. He's funny. He's smart. Bill might have eaten up too much time, though. I mean, we wouldn't have had time for the rest of the highlights. But what and it was no offense to anybody I didn't ask, because there's 20 more people I would have loved to have on. I tried to just make it my Seattle crew mainly, and then Aaron was, the bonus.
Yeah. Well, Kenny, I want to thank you again for coming on today, and we're going to be sure to put your charity link description in our bio description. And thank you again for coming on speaking with us.
Thanks for having me.